Hello nerds, welcome once again to Junior High School Hour on Joy Learning TV. Today we are having our revision show and I hope the whole of this week has been wonderful for you because it has been a tech week for me and it's been wonderful. Well, we are going to the weekends and we need to be a little bit techy before we go into the weekends. Okay, today we are going to deal with something very interesting and it's one of the office tools that I would say has a lot of applications if you have the chance to learn them. Today we are going to talk about introduction to Spreadsheet. Introduction to Spreadsheet. And this is one of the topics that I would say very, very important. It has application to researchers, to bankers, to even programmers. I know as nerds like you would like to program one of these days. Don't worry, one of these days I will hook you up with what programming. Okay, by the time we are done with this learning, you should be able to at least identify some features of the Excel window or the spreadsheet window. You should be able to be familiar with this spreadsheet window. You know, the buttons, the ribbons, the tabs. You should be easy to identify them, and you should also be able to identify cell names. These are very, very important. Cell names in spreadsheet application, and enter data to create a file in spreadsheet. It's just these three simple things, but they hold a lot. Now, I know most of you are familiar with launching an application. It should be the prerequisite for this lesson today, because if you have a problem launching an application, it will be difficult for you to launch the spreadsheet application. By the way, for those who have no idea of how to do it, I'm going to show you a quick way. There are three main ways to launch an application, and the first one is to click and press enter key on your keyboard. Before I continue, if you don't have a laptop before you or a phone before you or a tablet, please, if mommy is having one, just request mommy to give you her laptop or daddy to give you her laptop. Or even if you have an elder sibling, you can ask. But if you don't have, don't worry. We will have a practical lesson which will be interesting and you will have a feel of it. Okay, as I was saying, we have to first you should be able to launch an application. And the first one I said is to click on the icon and press enter on the keyboard. The second type is to right click on the icon or the file you want to open just to launch the application. Right click on the icon, then you click on or you select open to launch your application. The third one is to double click. And when we say double click, we mean to click twice, but it should be faster. Now, with this said, I think it's time for us to start our lesson. Well, so when we talk about spreadsheet, the first thing we need to know is what spreadsheet really is about. Now, when we're talking about spreadsheet is a computer application which is used for organizing, analyzing, and storage of data in tabular form. So over here, it is clear that spreadsheet application is always in a table form. I've underlined tabular form, it's in a table form. And another thing you should keep in mind is that spreadsheet application is for organization. But what are we organizing? We'll get to that, don't worry. Analysis and storage of data. Now, spreadsheet basically deals with figures. Even though there are text or letters in there, but spreadsheet basically deals with figures. So for you to understand, or if you are someone who loves figures, then spreadsheet is something that you should love. Because if you start manipulating it, you have this joy of having the feel of a nerd. But don't worry, if you get anything or you get stuck anywhere, remember, nerds, we get stuck, but we continue. Okay, as we said, spreadsheets are for what? Organizing. So what do we organize? One, we organize figures, we organize data. Now, data in this sense, we are referring to numbers. We are referring to what? Numbers. And storage, we can store numbers also. And we said analysis. Now, when it comes to the analysis side, we can talk about what? Research work, where numbers are involved. Banking sector, where numbers are involved. I know most of you are saying that, oh, so if I want to work in the bank or the financial institution, will I be using Excel? Yes, you will be using Excel, but that's not the only place that Excel can be used. Well, before we close, I know one of you or all of you will be able to identify some other places where Excel can be used or where Excel is applicable. Now, as we continue, we said spreadsheets were developed as computerized form of paper accounting. So over here, we realize that it is what specifically, or it was purposely developed for what? Paper type of accounting sheet. That means those who are into accounting, or those of you who want to what? Get into, how do we call it? Accounting or the business sector. Yes, you'll be using a lot of what? Spreadsheet. You'll be using it throughout your working career. And formerly, we were using paper, but it's now been easy, or it has been made easy for us now using what? The spreadsheet. The program is made up of rows and columns. Rows and columns. Yes, as we said before, it's in what? A tabular form or in a table form. If it is in a table form, then definitely there should be what? Rows and columns. Now, someone will be asking, what are rows, what are columns? We'll get to that, don't worry. But I remember when we were kids, we were asked, maybe a teacher comes to class and says, first row, come. And what we refer to as row, it was during spreadsheet tutorials when I realized that actually what we were referring as rows was rather columns. What we were referring as rows were rather what? Columns. So don't worry. Probably you might have the same issue when we get there, when we get to the interface, of which we will definitely go there because we have to know the features. So when we get there, we will know what are rows and what are what? Columns. So we say what? They are made up of what? Rows and columns. It has the ability to calculate values using mathematical formula and data in cells. It has the ability to calculate values using mathematical formula and data in what? Cells. There are number of commercial spreadsheet programs available for a number of computer platforms. Now, over here, computer platforms is referring to different operating systems, because not all operating systems will have the same spreadsheet application. The most common one that we are familiar with, that is with those of us who are using the Windows, is Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel. But if you look on our slides here, you realize that we have one called the Lotus 123. It is rather unfortunate that the Lotus 123 is no more in existence, or the usage has been stopped. It's no more in use. So we also have the Quattro Pro, and as I've already mentioned, MS Excel. Now, I would like you to do something for me. Why don't you try searching for other spreadsheets, other spreadsheets. There are a lot of them. I can just give you a tip. We have what we call the Google Forms. Google Forms is also another example of what? Spreadsheet. So there are numerous or countless of them. So why don't you, after this lesson, try your hands searching for some of these spreadsheets. Okay, now we have identified what the spreadsheets are and what they are used for. Now, let's look at the features of a spreadsheet. For examination purpose, and since this is a revision lesson, we should take note that the spreadsheet I'm going to show you is for 2003 and 2007. but the one we will be using for our lesson will not be the same, but they have the same functions. Nothing changes. It's just some features that change. So I'm going to show you the picture of 2003 spreadsheet and 2007 spreadsheet. So let's take the first one, which is parts of the Windows Excel. This is talking about the Windows Excel, the spreadsheet. This is how it looks like. And this is for 2003 Excel. This is for 2003. Now, as every open window has, the Excel or the spreadsheet over here also has what we call the title bar. It has a title bar. It has the standard bars or toolbars every other open window has. And after the title bar, we have the menu bar, then we have the standard bar. Then we have other tools of which we will come back to. We will look at them very carefully. Now, as I started, I mentioned rows and columns. Now, if you look on our screens very carefully, you realize that there is this green bar flowing from up to down or from the north to the south. Now, and in there it's written what? Column. In there it's written what? Column. And if you look just beneath this place, the cell, we have our row. And the row is moving from what? The east to the west. From what? The east to the west. So this is what we call the row, and this is what we call the column. Now, over here, you realize that we have two characters here, which is C4. C4, over there, we have what we call the name box. The name box. Then, just after the C4, we have what we call FX. The FX, which stands for what? Formula bar. The whole bar over here, where we have cell written, is called the formula bar. We will look at some terms and we will realize why we have the formula bar, the column in it. We will look at their definitions, so don't worry. Let's look at the 2007 Excel interface. With the 2007, there was a slight change. In 2003 Office, Microsoft had everything in ribbons. That means they were in bars. But when they started in 2007, they began with what we call the tabs. The tabs. So anytime you click on, let's say, the home tab, it opens the home menu for you. So it is what? Tabs. So over here we have our quick access toolbar. We have our title bar like any other Microsoft Office application. We have our Office button. Then we come to our name box. We have select button. We also have our formula bar, which is the same as what is in the 2003. There's no difference. Then we have our column headings. We have worksheet window. We will look at the definition for worksheet window, so don't worry. So this is just a few of the interface, a few names which can be found on the interface. Now, let's look at the terminologies. What worksheet is, what a column is, what a row is. Through the definition, we will be able to understand it better. So, we start the terminologies. We have column. A column is defined as the vertical space that goes up and down the window. The vertical space. When we are talking about vertical space, we are talking about a line that moves from what? Up to down. So we are looking at what? North and south. The vertical space that moves from what? Up, downwards. Or in an open window. Now, letters of the alphabet are used to identify a column location. Letters of the alphabet are used to identify what? A column's location. Now let's go back to our interface and look at something. Let's take this interface. This one is better. You realize that where it is written column, we have a letter on top called E. A letter E on top. Now, and you realize that Since columns run from what? Top to down, then the whole of this place is a column. The whole of this place is a column. The whole of this place is a column. Then we have the B column, A column, C columns, D column, E column, F column, J column. But it doesn't end at Z or Z. It doesn't end at Z or what? Z. Let's look at this. It says that what? Letters of the alphabet are used to identify columns. Now, there are 256 columns in a single cell sheet. There are 256 columns in a single Excel sheet. Now, please take note. This 256 is referring to any worksheet any workbook or Excel sheet which is from 2003 to 2007. We are not going beyond 2003 and 2007. We are talking about 2003 and 2007. So we say that what it has was 256 columns in a single Excel sheet. The first column is labeled A, and the 26th is labeled Z or Z, because we have, how many characters do we have in the alphabet? Then the 27th, after the 26th, when it ends in Z, the letter that continues is AA. It will go through till the last column, which is IV. So the first column is A, and the last column, or the 256th column, is IV. That is where it ends. Now let's go to the row. We say a row is a horizontal space. A horizontal space that moves across the window. It moves what? Across the window. That means it moves from what? Left to right. It moves across the window. In MS Excel, numbers are used to identify a row's location. In MS Excel, numbers are used to identify a row's location. There are 65,536 rows in a workbook. A worksheet. I will tell you the reason why we have workbook and worksheet. There are 65,536 rows in an Excel worksheet. The first row is labeled 1, and the last row is labeled 65,536. Now, let's go to a cell. Let's look at this very well. When a row and a column meet, or when they intersect, is what we call a cell. So over here, where cell is written, there's a yellow shade. Where it is written is what we call a cell, and it is formed when what? A column and a row what? Meet. Where they meet becomes what we call a cell. So it says a cell is the intersection of a row and a column. Cells are denoted by specific names, which are derived from what? The combination of row number and the what? Column alphabet. The row number and the column alphabet. Example, A8, where we know A belongs to what? The column, and the row is number what? Row 8. So we look at row 8 and column A. We will be able to find this cell over there. And when we look at E154, we are talking about what? Column E and row 154. Cell names are also referred to as cell references. So when you see A8, it simply means it is the cell name, or what we call cell references. In as much as Excel uses numbers, there is one thing about Excel. In formula calculation or in the calculation or mathematical calculation, it does not use the numbers, but rather it uses what we call the cell names or the cell references. The cell names or the cell references. Now, how do you identify a cell name or a cell reference? Let's go back to this page and look at something. Now, where this arrow, let me point it this way, where we have our C4, is what we call, where we have our C4, is what we call the name box. The name box is purposely for what? Showing the cell that is active, or the active cell. The name for what? The active cell, or the cell reference for the active cell. So let's go back. Now, let's look at what we call a range. A range. A range is a group of cell or cell references denoted by a colon between the first cell and the last cell. The first cell and the last cell. So in this picture like this, in this picture, we can say that from this side, which is E1, to this place, that is E8, is what we call a range. Where we have the E1 to E8 is called the range. So if we want to write the range, we want to write it in its proper formula form, then we are going to have E1 then colon E8. This over here becomes what we call our cell, our range. So this is the first cell and the E8 becomes our last cell. So let's go back. Then we have what we call the workbook. Now, workbook is very simple. A workbook is basically a file created by a spreadsheet. A file created by a spreadsheet. So when you have created a document using Excel, your result or whatever file you have created is what we call the book, workbook. Now, within the workbook, we have what? Sheets. We have what? Sheets. That is why we came up with what? Worksheets. So the page on which you are working currently, when you open an Excel page, the page on which you are working becomes what we call your worksheet. So we say a worksheet is a page in the what? Workbook. A worksheet is a page in a workbook. Then active cell. An active cell is a cell that has been highlighted and data can be entered into. An active cell is a cell that has been highlighted and data can be what? Entered into. Now let's go to our diagram and look at an active cell. Now, if you look at all the cells that we have here, there is only one cell that has a black border around it. And that is where we have written what? Cell. It has what? A black border around it. It simply means this particular cell has been what? Highlighted. And anytime a cell is highlighted, whatever is written in the cell appears in the formula bar. Whatever is highlighted, it appears where? In the formula bar. And the name of that cell will also appear in the name box. Like what we have here as C4. That is where we have our name for this highlighted cell. So when a cell is highlighted like this, you can enter any data into what? It. And before you enter data into any cell, remember, you have to what? Highlight the cell.